Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We're going to start with the latest drought monitor, which was released last Thursday. And one of the things I want to really point out about this map is that while we still have 75% of the contiguous U.S. in some stage of drought, we're going to see some major changes in this drought monitor map in this region. Now remember, the data that you see here went through last Tuesday, and since then we saw some very, very heavy precipitation, most of it coming in through this area here and down into Florida. And why we're concerned about this is because as we go into any spring, the extent of drought is always front of mind because it just makes us think about what those spring precipitation patterns may look like. Now, just to bring this back to the point, the western United States from Texas and Oklahoma getting back up into parts of Montana and then into the west has been very dry. In fact, take a look at this map. This map shows you since January 1st up until yesterday, the 13th, what the precipitation ranks look like by climate district. You can see how wet it's been in parts of the Mid-South, the Eastern Corn Belt, and parts of North Carolina. But some of the drier conditions we've seen right here along the coast have recently been alleviated, and we expect better precipitation coming. But the Central Plains, and then of course California, Nevada, Oregon, all very, very dry, missing out a lot of precipitation. And you can just see this. Look where it was over the last week. The heaviest rains were in through this corridor and through here, where some places picked up in excess over the last 7 days of 3 inches of rainfall right in through this area. Heaviest rains are down here in Florida, really wiping out any drought concern we had in that region. I also want to show you, we did get some snow kind of knocking on our doorstep here. If you just look back over the last 3 days, got up to the Appalachian Mountains, but the heaviest snows went into the interior parts of New England. Okay, thinking about all of this, let's just go take a look at the temperatures and then we'll get into a longer term discussion. This past weekend also delivered quite a bit of colder air. And this map, you can see every location that experienced a temperature either at or below freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I shaded it all in the color of gray. So that was most of the United States. In fact, we got some pretty cold temperatures down into Texas, which is probably going to impact the early planted corn crop that was down here. Now, in last Monday's report, we knew that about 20% of Texas was planted, and so this could have possibly been quite problematic for this region. But the bigger question is, what are these temperatures going to be doing? And I want to talk about temperatures first today, because over the next 10 days, we favor a lot of mild air. So this map shows the 10-day forecast by the ECMWF looking at precipitation anomalies. So you put all the days together and compare them to normal, and what it says is we have limited chances of getting some cooler air in place. Now, why I want to discuss this is because after the cold weather we just experienced, the big question is, are we just going to fully break into spring in the East Coast, in the Carolinas? Because when you look here at the spring forecast, now this was released in mid-February. The CPC should be updating this later on this week with their newest outlook, but they were calling for a better chance than not of having above average temperatures for us over here in the mid-Atlantic into the Carolinas for March, April, and May. And that same forecast was echoed by the European model update, which came out early last week, which again showed better chances of seeing above normal temperatures March, April, and May. This was also echoed by the NMME. That would be the National Multi-Model Ensemble. Again, April, May, June, favoring above average temperatures. So this looks like the best chances, according to our models, are for above normal temperatures going into spring. But we always have this question about when's that last frost and what do we need to be on the lookout for in terms of the timing of that last frost. So let's address that, okay? So here's how I'm going to do this. Throughout the end of March and into April, we need to be looking at history to be a guide for what to be on the lookout for. So I went into the state of North Carolina, went back to 1970 and reconstructed the temperatures for April. That's what we're looking at here. Now you can actually see we have a warming trend for April. That's the blue line. That's a linear trend since 1970, suggesting we've warmed up about a degree and a half on average. Now, if you'd like to do this yourself, the website is just Climate at a Glance. You can Google that and find this site and create these time series for any month, any variable that you want. But what I wanted to do was take the individual Aprils, rank them according to warmest to coldest. And I plucked off the 10 warmest Aprils on record and said, what happened in those Aprils to continue the warm conditions and alleviate the risk of a late frost? So as you can imagine, it took a pretty sizable ridge to sit right in through here to make that occur. The jet stream retreated pretty far to the north. The coldest air stayed north. So what we ended up getting here was a big ridge that sat basically over North Carolina and Virginia, sending the warm air northward of that and preventing, the intrusions of deep cold air from coming in. So we got to get this. Now, what it typically takes to give us a pattern like that is not really correlated with ocean temperatures. Now, I talk a lot about La Nina, and I talk a lot about the transition we'll have later this year into possibly INSO-neutral or even El Nino conditions. But in spring, the relationship between the temperature patterns in North Carolina and the ocean temperature patterns is almost non-existent. It helps to have quite a bit of warm water just off the coast, but there is no strong signal in our La Nina region at all here to talk about. So when I show you this is what we currently are looking at. Our La Nina is still kicking and quite strong right now, given that it had been fading really since December. We do have warm water that is in place off the coast, so that at least is correlated. But what I want to make a point about here is that I think what's really got a control on our pattern is the influence of La Nina on the MJO. And the MJO has a much stronger correlation with our spring temperatures. Yep, all the way over here in the Indian Ocean. You see, when we look back on those years where we had really mild Aprils, the MJO loved to sit right here from phase 5 to 6 and 7, and not in the Indian Ocean, which is phases like 2 and 3. So why do I bring this up? The current forecast is the MJO to be in phase 2. This was part of the correlation, part of the pattern that delivered the cold weather that we just saw. But you see, it's forecast to come into phase 3 and 4 and 5. Likelihood of this collapsing back into null space and emerging over here is higher than it continuing the loop. And why I'm telling you that is because even though you see all of these mild forecasts, a lot of them are predicated on the MJO coming out into phase 5 and staying here into phase 6. Because look at this. Whenever we have the MJO going from phase 3, where the ridge sits here, into phase 4, where the ridge backs up here, and then into phase 5, where it sits here, we're going to be mild. What we have seen repeatedly is that the MJO has failed to cross what we call the Maritime Pacific. I'm talking about north of Australia. And if it comes collapsing back in again, it could deliver the risk of some colder weather again in April. Now, I'm not talking about major cold weather, but just not the full breakaway into super mild spring. This is just what's kind of the risk is currently. Now, I'll show you that. The European model, look at what they're calling for by the end of March. That's what you're seeing here. See this trough in place? That's not the right position to have sustained mild air from now, all the way until next winter. You got to have a big ridge that sits in this area, and the models are not calling for that currently. See this? And as we go into April and May, while they're trying to let that colder air retreat, which is a good signal, as we go from March into April, while they're trying to let that colder air retreat, I don't see the ridge developing here that's going to break us off into a very warm April. So what I'm saying here is that I think we have near normal spring frost risk, despite some other folks calling for some, very mild conditions. So let's go take a look. Let's zoom this in. Let's come down here to the United States, and let's look at a temperature pattern, a 30-day temperature pattern. Can you see it? I'll just let this slide out here, even into early April. The models just aren't breaking away, giving us really mild signals for this particular area. That just means that I think we're going to see more normal April, gotta get my month straight, more normal April risks for shots at cooler air. And I'll show you in a few moments what that means based on history with respect to our last frost dates. So let's do this first. What about this same time period looking at precipitation? Now, I'll come back to precip in a few moments because we have some wet weather returning. But overall, from March 20 to April 20, we do favor above normal precipitation for our region as well. Okay, with all that being said, I do want to give you some other supporting evidence of this. We've looked at multiple models. This right here shows the end of March and the risk the models are showing at bringing in another shot at colder air. So if I could stitch this all together for you, because we just covered a lot of things here. We look out here and see this mild pattern coming. What I want to suggest is that the end of March and the beginning of April may deliver another shot at colder air. That's what I'm trying to stress here. And what I want to do for you now is show you a tool that you can use that's built here on my website from Nutrien that'll allow you to kind of look at this historically and forecast it. So it's agweather.com, ag-wx.com. This is where we're currently putting all of our weather maps for Nutrien. What I want you to do is come over here to this box, click on it, and start typing in the location. I'll type in Raleigh, just as an example. I just started typing it, it shows up. It'll put the number 47 in there when you click on it, and that 47 means that Raleigh is the 47th largest city in the U.S. I just use it as an index. You click Submit, and you're going to get a couple of things right away. The first thing that shows up is an all hazards map. Notice right down here, we still have frost and freeze warnings in Alabama and getting over to Georgia. But the first thing you do is click here, and that'll give you your National Weather Service forecast. So I just scraped their API so you can see temperatures and precipitation, even read the forecast here. But while all of that was working, a new link will appear down at the bottom. You can click on that one to see your multi-model forecast. Now there's a couple of things I want you to look at on this for temperature. First, you can click on this and just see the daily highs and lows forecast by the National Weather Service. Great resource. You can also come back to this and click here and get your multi-model temperature forecast. And I put on here a frost zone. See it? So we want to be watching for any temperatures, these lines, to dip down in this area. Let's also go down to the bottom because there's a bunch of stuff on precipitation here. I'll talk about that in a second. But down at the very bottom, you'll see, here it is, this graph. It's your year-to-date temperature pattern compared to average. So we've really bounced around quite a bit so far this year. And with that, you can start to look at this graphic. It's growing degree day units compared to the last 5 years, plus frost information. Now this is only for Raleigh, North Carolina. You see these blue bars? They represent historically over the last 40 years when we've had frost events. And we're just adding them up. So for example, it turns out that about the 10th or 11th of April is historically the most common date to have the last frost. They've happened as late as April 23rd, but most commonly they're here. And what I'm suggesting is that we need to be watching probably late March, early April for our last frost this year. First frost is way down here at the beginning of November, okay? But we're going to watch GDUs accumulate throughout the year. And once we get past that last frost, we'll keep a really close eye on this. So I just wanted to point you to a tool that I've developed that I hope you all like to use. All right, let's go from there now back to this. This next week, let's go back to precipitation. We're going to be watching two systems. One that's going to come out of the Red River Valley at the south first. That's going to spread some rain. And we have another one coming out later this week out of Colorado. It's going to go to New England. That's going to spread some rain. To show you that, let's go to the high-res NAM model first. So playing through today, high pressure in control for us. Into Monday night, what we're watching is right here. Now we're under high pressure Monday and Tuesday, but see this storm system here, possibly increasing risk of severe weather over this part of the south. Well, let's play faster. Getting into Tuesday and eventually into Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. That's when that low finally gets over and starts to spread rain out of the south through South Carolina first, and then comes into the southern half of North Carolina by Wednesday midday. From there, let's switch over to the European model to see where this goes. So we've already seen up to here. Now, so throughout the day on Wednesday, that's our chance for showers and storms. See that? Then that one clears out, and the next system comes out of Colorado. This is Friday morning, getting here into Friday evening, now into Saturday, bringing in the chance for scattered storms by Saturday. By the way, the atmosphere is not done just yet. That system clears this weekend, and another one forms here next Monday. And every time these form, guess where they go? They head off to the east as you expect. Now, this one's got the risk for severe storms in it, all the way from the southern plains, and it will likely, if it holds together, bring us a severe weather risk out here to next Wednesday. But that's pretty far out in the forecast, so we just need to sit back and watch where that one's going to go. But I'm watching all that very carefully. How much rain are we talking about? Well, here comes the first system. When does it arrive? Well, this is through 7 a.m. Wednesday. We're dry. But then as we go into the day on Wednesday, the chance for the scattered showers and storms doesn't deliver much. The second system comes through here over the weekend. And again, see your precipitation totals. Most areas are going to be receiving less than 1/2 of an inch. But this is ahead of that third and big system. That third one that comes through, it may really bring in some heavy rains. We'll watch out for that one as it gets here. But again, that's about 10 days out from now. Is it in the ensembles? It is. So looking out there on the 24th of March, see that trough coming through? That's the trough that's going to initiate the shot of cold air behind it, and the possibility of some strong to severe storms out ahead of it. But that's really getting out there next Wednesday, Thursday timeframe. But it is showing up in the ensembles as being wetter than average. So we're going to watch this because this is the drop busting that we're talking about happening throughout the end of the month of March. From here, take a look at the temperatures. There's Monday's highs compared to normal. As we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, the central United States into the Corn Belt, very mild. Then as we get into Thursday, that starts to push into our area. A lot of temperatures in the 60s and lower 70s. And then Friday is going to be our warm day. And then the front tries to slide through over the weekend, knocking temperatures back off. But doesn't knock them off too cool. What about day 5 through 10? Well, we still see more mild days than cooler days as the jet stream really retreats to the north. But the time period I'm going to watch carefully is that day 10 through 15. That's the end of the month of March and beginning of April. Do you see how the warmth stays west? We get better chances at seeing near normal, maybe even another shot at cooler air. That's what I'm going to try to keep a close eye on for you. That's why we discussed that last frost risk at the beginning of this video. Okay, we covered a lot, but if you give me another moment here, I'm going to talk about South America. Remember, early in the season, the greatest drought risk was in southern Brazil into Paraguay and then throughout Argentina down here. Now, over the next 7 days, Argentina is going to be drier, but we're bringing in major drought relief to the central part of Brazil. Near normal rains this week in Mato Grosso, and they're done planting corn, that safrinha corn crop, and harvesting the soybeans. Watch what happens, though, as we play this forward in a 1-week sliding window. You see, getting out here fully into week 2, which is right there, northern growing areas show a little bit of a drier signal. You say, why? Well, that's because the MJO, when it goes over into phases 4 and 5, historically gives more suppression to the monsoon, making things drier here. As long as this doesn't last, this is okay. Heavier rains are coming into southern Brazil and Argentina, which is going to help with the crop conditions in those areas. So the big question is, does this last? And the last thing I'll show you, we go over to the European weeklies, and we just play this out over the next 30 days. We see that the models really want to keep this region drier, and that could put some risk on this safrinha crop. I'll be watching for the latest update to this later on today. I'll put it in tomorrow morning's report for those of you that receive it. You can use this link right here to get signed up. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you on Monday. Thanks.